Hey, good afternoon, everybody. This is Bill O'Leary coming to you Thursday afternoon from Legacy Planning Law Group, estate and elder law attorney, and this is what we call our Thirsty Thursday series. And so, what I try to do every Thursday at about this time is come to you and talk to you about a different topic each week that might relate to elder law or estate planning and so forth. So. As I say every week, if you're thirsting for knowledge, you have come to the right place. So today's topic is going to be this. Here's the question. Hey, I'm marrying into a blended family. Do I need a prenuptial agreement, a prenup? You know, so in leading up to marriage, between sending out wedding invitations, finding the perfect place for the wedding, maybe ordering the cake and so forth. Um, Susie Orman, who you may have heard of, she's a financial expert on CNBC. She encourages every couple to make a time ahead of time to draw up and sign a prenup agreement. Orman says, look, it may feel unromantic, but it's an important step towards protecting yourself and your finances later on if you were to become divorced or at your death. Both of those important events. So she says that hey, look, she gets too many emails from older women and men saying, hey, they've lost everything. And so Orman says the best way to prevent this from happening is to get a prenup. She goes on to say, it's interesting that, she says, hey, contrary to popular belief, having these conversations ahead of time isn't going to ruin your relationship. In fact, it could actually make it stronger. A side benefit to getting a prenup is that it sort of forces a couple into getting down into the sort of the nitty gritty, if you will, the details of their finances, and to talk about how they, how they view money. They may view money differently. You know, if you can't talk about money to the person you're about to marry, then you may be doomed for failure because money, frankly, is going to run through your relationship more than anything else. Now, when the word prenuptial is brought up, it can bring about sort of strange feelings. Feelings such as, oh my gosh, my fiance wants to get a prenup. She's already thinking about the divorce before we've gotten married, or maybe feeling like your fiance to you, or maybe you having those feelings, kind of guilt feelings. Hey, I don't completely trust my fiance. So it's true that sort of a prenup can get a bad rap, and sometimes people don't have the best intentions behind them, but they're actually more common than you think. In particular, when it comes to a second, the focus here, a second marriage, um, and especially with blended families. So if one or both spouses are coming into that second marriage with children from a prior marriage, prenups have become fairly common. There was a report came out 2015, so I guess it's about 5, 6 years ago now, from the Pew Research Center that indicated that 16% of children that are living with a step parent or a step sibling or a half sibling, those are in fact the numbers. Okay, that's the reality. Now, when blending families together, you and your fiance in a second marriage need to make sure that children from previous marriages will be protected in the event that the second marriage comes to an end. A prenuptial agreement allows you to allocate where the money goes, and it helps protects you from the other spouse's debts. Think about that. The other spouse may get into debt. You can be protected from that. Now, a prenuptial agreement details the disposition of not only the assets that you own now, each of you coming into the marriage, but future assets that you may acquire, and it deals with them, how best to allocate them, again, if you become divorced or at the death of the first of you. And money has a way of stirring up interesting emotions and rivalries. So the point is, future problems can be headed off before they occur with a good prenup. Now, what are some things to consider if you've decided that you want to sort of go down that path of getting a prenup? First of all, each spouse or fiance has to fully disclose all of their assets, their income, and their debts. And particularly if it's a second marriage and you're older, both of you are most likely coming into that marriage with sort of established financial lives already. And so as your lives are combined, You both need to know how much the other earns, how many assets each of you owns, and importantly, as I mentioned, how much debt each of you has coming into the marriage. Another thing to consider is to talk about what is fair. What does fair mean to you versus what it means to me? Most of the time, one spouse will be entering the marriage with more assets than the other, so determining what's fair to each of you is very, very important. Um, Also, talk about, well, what assets are going to be combined, that they come into the marriage separate. Are we going to combine any of them, or maybe are we going to, moving forward, maybe open up a combined or a joint bank account or investment account, and then also decide what assets are going to be kept separate. What about deciding who's going to pay for each of your children's care if they're younger? Are you going to pay everything out of one pool of money or two separate pools of money? And again, this is especially important. Let's say one of the spouses is coming into the marriage with a special needs child because they require more care, more resources. Who's going to pay for routine expenses like clothing and school, extracurricular activities, going out to dinner, that kind of thing? Will they come from sort of a blended or combined source of money or separate resources? Decide also how you're going to deal with financial imbalances if one sort of extended family has more resources than the other. Okay? You don't want that to be a surprise down the road. Then also talk about and think about sort of big ticket items that may be coming down the pike, like cars for kids, or determining how college savings are going to, those funds are going to be handled, or how the savings accounts are going to be funded. Now, in the event of your death, think about this. How will your life insurance, if you have it, how will it be distributed? More than likely, you're going to want your children from your prior marriage to receive at least some portion of that life insurance payout. And it's a very common sort of tool or technique that's used to make sure that your kids from your prior marriage are going to get something if you pass away first, is through the use of life insurance and naming them as beneficiaries. It's also critical at this point to consider your estate plan. Up to now, your estate plan maybe is based on a previous marriage, or maybe it was changed after that. Now it's based on just you. Well, now it's you and your new spouse. You need to update your estate plan. It's important to make sure that any inheritance you pass is going to go to the right people, the people that you want. For example, do you want to leave an inheritance to your children from your previous marriage, as I just said? Use life insurance, other assets. If these things are not clearly laid out beforehand, it can create sort of terrible, almost irreparable harm and division among family members. And don't forget about retirement. You each need to consider how you're going to save for retirement and make it a top priority. Are you going to fund retirement together, jointly, or separately? Retirement funds often become a hot topic during divorce proceedings. And then the final thing you might want to consider, and no less important, a prenuptial agreement is going to help protect you against certain of your spouse's debts, like I've said. You can specify which debts belong to whom and navigate through this confusion. The prenup can be written to protect your spouse from your debts and protect you from your spouse's debt. Look, you don't want your credit impacted from someone else's mistakes, including your spouse's, and you don't want to be paying for someone else's bills. So once you sort of work through some of these initial considerations, you say, with your fiance, okay, we are ready to go. We're going to start putting pen to paper. What are some things to do to put in place? Very important. Number one, get help from a lawyer. Look, it might be tempted to try to download something for free, some do-it-yourself form. A lot of times those do not stand up in court as a prenup. They don't, because they don't meet all of the legal requirements. And each party, fiance, needs to have a separate lawyer in order for it to work, in order for it to be upheld. If it's later, asked to be, if it's later challenged by a court. Number two, okay, it's been put together, it's been drafted by the lawyer. Read all the details, okay? Take ownership of it. Once the prenup's been drawn up, read it carefully and make sure you understand all of the details. And look, I understand legal jargon can be challenging to understand, so take the time to talk it over with your lawyer. And then the last sort of piece of advice, don't rush into it. You know, just like marriage, you don't want to rush into signing a prenup. You know, you don't do it on the way to the church or the chapel. Ideally, it should be done, finished, and signed 3 to 4 months at a minimum before the marriage. Certainly no less than 30 days. That's sort of a soft threshold. If somebody were to come to me and say, "Hey, I want you to draw up a prenup for me and we're getting married in 2 weeks," I'd say, "I'm not doing it for you because it's not going to hold up." Because think about it, you know, what would the other spouse be able to come in and later argue? "Hey, pressured to do this in order to get married. We were on the, you know, on the church doorstep, and I was pressured into it." So take your time, okay? And oh, by the way, what if you're already married but you don't have a prenup agreement? Is it too late? No, it's not. You can still get what's called a postnuptial agreement. Instead of a prenuptial, before the marriage, a postnuptial is post, after the marriage has occurred. You can enter into a very similar arrangement where sort of, you know, assets are determined, and you decide what's going to happen if you get divorced or at death and that sort of thing. Very similar. But think, it might be hard convincing your spouse to do a postnup after you've gotten married. Think about it. What's the incentive? Particularly if you're the spouse that came into the marriage with more assets than the other, well, what incentive does your spouse have to enter it? There's really none, because you've already gotten married. So if you'd like to know more about this topic of basically you're marrying into a blended family and whether you need a prenup, and if you'd like to know how we can help, we would be happy to talk to you. As I've mentioned before, you can book a free 15-minute phone call with us, select the Book Now button on the Facebook page, or you can go ahead and just Google us, legacyplanninglawgroup.com. And what this 15-minute call does is it basically gives both of us a chance to sort of have a little mutual interview to see whether we might sort of work well together and to better understand your situation, so that I can tell you pretty quickly, hey, I can help you, or hey, I can't, but maybe you can give this person a call. Okay? So I hope you've enjoyed this talk. Hey, by the way, if you've liked what you like this video, and better yet, I'd love it if you could share it with your friends. So I hope you enjoyed this talk about, you know, marrying into a blended family. Should you get a prenup or not? As I said, I'm going to give another talk, Facebook Live next Thursday at about this time, basically same day, same topic, same day, different topic, I should say. So if you're thirsting for knowledge, we will quench your thirst. So Bill O'Leary signing off for now on behalf of everybody here, my great team here at Legacy Planning Law Group. Go make it a great day.